Here's the full translation to American English. With character names adapted to American names, the gate creaked like a bad tooth every time he pushed it inward. The street was grey with construction dust, and the mango trees in the yard had dropped their leaves like someone dropping bad news on the ground. Robert leaned his shoulder into the iron, shoved hard, and stepped in. He carried a black elastic-bound folder under his arm, the kind of folder that only shows up when someone is about to sign, sell, and be done. He didn't look back. The neighbor's dog barked loud, as if to announce, "Today's the day." On the porch, the crooked crocheted rug reminded him of his mother tripping the day before he decided to put her in a facility for a while, just to recuperate. He said that to his aunt, to the social worker, to himself in the mirror for a while. Only the while stretched like an old rubber band, and the house started to feel like a safe left half-latched. The realtor had to be on his way already. The developer's offer expired in 48 hours, and the bank manager, the one who called every customer champ, swore the wire would hit the same day. Robert took a breath. His sharpest memory of his mother in that yard was a silly little ritual. Every afternoon at 6 p.m., and when she'd switch on the kitchen's warm bulb, brew coffee in a cloth strainer, and set 2 cups on the table even though she lived alone. One's for your father, God rest him, and the others for when you decide to drop by. He always said he would, and work always showed up first. Now the strainer hung from a nail, brown from so much use, and the cups were upside down, draining dust. He laid the folder on the table and opened it. Old deed, property tax booklet, 2 certificates, a photocopy of his mother's ID stamped with a smudged seal, an admission authorization he had signed, and the realtor's card embossed in gold. Robert cracked his knuckles. He swept his eyes around the kitchen looking for something to make him linger, then decided no. He opened the big window onto the yard, and by accident triggered another memory. His mother sitting on the concrete bench filing her nails, saying wills were for rich people and for folks who don't trust their own kids. "My inheritance is prayer, son, and this patch right here where your father planted the guava." His phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from the realtor. "Robert, I'm on my way with the developer's rep. Doc's okay?" He typed, "Yes," and deleted it before sending. A silly hesitation. He typed, "All set. Bring the contract. Sent." He went to his mother's bedroom. The floral bedspread was still pulled tight, not a crease out of place. On the nightstand, an old photo. Him and his mom. He about 9 years old, holding a badly made kite. Her sun-browned face, hand clamped on the boy's shoulder. Next to the photo, a shoebox with a limp rubber band. He opened it. Old papers, folded letters, newspaper clippings, and at the bottom, a manila envelope with his name written in pen, for Robert. "Open in case I'm gone." Her handwriting with that R that rose and dropped like it tripped. His heart skipped. It wasn't the moment to invent another errand, but his hand opened the envelope on its own. Inside, a letter-sized sheet with notarized signatures dated 4 months ago. Disposition of last will. The title iced his blood. A will. He read fast, stumbling over the legalese. "I bequeath the property located at Fray Galvão Street, number 318, total 420 square meters, to be partitioned under a suspensive condition." And then, like a punch, "Provided that my son, Robert, maintains under his care the residence of Mrs. Teresa Dorsey, currently living in the back of the same lot for the duration of her life, with the right to use and enjoy the service area and front garden under a life estate, usufruct, and that he assume her basic expenses. In case of non-compliance, full title transfers to the Peaceful Rest Senior Association EIN listed herein for community purposes while preserving Mrs. Teresa's life estate." Mrs. Teresa Dorsey was the neighbor out back, a railroad widow, his mother's friend. One day when the street's water line was shut off, Teresa had come in with 2 buckets to draw water from the well in his mother's yard and never stopped coming. He vaguely remembered seeing the 2 of them in silence, watering the plants in flip-flops when he arrived late, coughing apologies. He stepped back and reread every line. The signature, Mary Louise Fisher, his mother, notarized by authenticity at the neighborhood registry office. 2 witnesses, Jackie Helen and Mark Paul. The word condition stung like pepper in his eye. A car honked outside. He folded the paper quickly, slid it back into the envelope and buried it at the bottom of the folder. The realtor didn't need to see it. The developer's rep swung the gate fast, like ripping off a bandage. Handshakes, hurried hellos. The realtor started right in about square footage, lot potential. An 8-story mid-rise with ground floor retail. Robert nodded mechanically. His head hammered. Suspensive condition? Mrs. Teresa's life estate. Association. Notary at 3, the realtor asked. I already called the notary. We sign, get stamps, and the deposit hits today. This developer doesn't mess around. 3, Robert repeated. 3 is fine. Then another shadow. A message from the social worker at the nursing home where his mother was staying. Sent at 7 a.m. Good morning, Mr. Robert. Mrs. Mary had an episode of night confusion. We recommend a visit today to evaluate with the geriatrician. He'd archived it without answering. Now the notification blinked like a shard of glass in the sun. Can we look at the back? The developer's rep asked. The word back stuck in his throat. Robert opened the kitchen door and led the men down the side passage. At the end, 2 houses, the main one where they were, and the little back house, low roof, plaster flaking, a calico curtain in the window. They clapped. The scrape of a chair came from inside. The curtain twitched, and Mrs. Teresa's wrinkled face appeared, pigeon-eyed from seeing too much. That you, Robert? Her voice rasped, but it was steady. Your mother? He had to swallow. She's being well cared for, Mrs. Teresa. She'll be home before long. Mrs. Teresa looked at the men in suits behind him and understood without being told. Her hand pinched the curtain. Your mother talked to me, you know. Gave me paper. Paper doesn't rot. Robert smiled from one corner of his mouth. Yes, ma'am. You can rest easy. The developer's rep began measuring with his eyes, talking about setbacks and easements, when Mrs. Teresa opened the door and came out with a little roll of documents tied with a blue ribbon. Here. She told me to keep this in case those shoes showed up without knocking. She handed them to Robert, not to the men. It was a registry extract, same protocol number as the will, certified copy, notarized signatures, date. Sweat prickled Robert's neck. The realtor, curious, craned his neck. Robert slipped the papers into his jacket pocket, the way you shelter matches on a windy day. Mrs. Teresa, you use this garden area, right? The rep asked, trying to sound gentle. We can work something out. That's not what his mother wrote, she answered, without raising her voice. Life estate. It's in the paper, a word you don't wash down with a donut. Little by little, street sounds pooled up. The propane guy yelling gas, a neighbor sweeping the sidewalk, a kid thumping a ball against the wall. Somehow everyone sensed there was a thin wire of war stretched there, silent but loud. They went back to the kitchen. The realtor began to sweat. Robert, here's what we do. You sign the purchase and sale agreement today, and these smaller issues we solve on title. We've got attorneys for that. Robert pulled out a chair and sat. The wood groaned like tired bones. He thought of calling his sister, Helen, with whom he hadn't really spoken since their father's funeral. Helen was the type who kept receipts and memories in the same drawer. Maybe she knew something. He picked up the phone, then stopped. This needed more than improv. I only sign after the registry confirms the will's condition, he said, surprising himself. What will? The realtor shot back. Robert realized there was no turning back. A document my mother left. It conditions the sale. The sale's in your hands, the rep interjected. Your mother's the title holder, but you're the legal responsible party. The admission authorization. He stopped. He knew he'd stepped wrong. That paper doesn't give me the right to sell without honoring what she put in writing, Robert answered, and the sentence itself felt like the first stone laid on a bridge he hadn't imagined building. Annoyed, the realtor made the call he always made when things veered off script. I'm calling Attorney Valence, he'll sort it out. While he stepped away, Helen appeared in the doorway like she'd walked out of an old photograph. I knocked and no one heard. Hair pulled back in careful haste, a big crossbody bag. The nurse called me early. You didn't answer. I came straight from work. Robert stood. The hug didn't happen. We're resolving the property, he said, as if resolve were a clean verb. Mom's place? Helen looked at the realtor, the rep, and Mrs. Teresa still peeking from the hall. Then resolve it with her. She took an old key from her bag. She asked me to bring this to you if you showed up before 6. Said you'd understand. The key was to the metal cabinet in the laundry, where their father kept things nobody touched. Tools, a green folder, an old radio. They went to the laundry together. The key grated in the lock. Inside, on top of the radio, sat the green folder. He pulled it out. A label in ballpoint pen read, Title plus Attachments. He opened it. Along with the title were a stamped res judicata from their father's probate, a city notice, and a handwritten letter from his mother in that same tripping script. If Robert opens this before the 6 p.m. coffee, it's because he learned to show up on time. He checked his watch. 2:20 p.m. Helen caught the thread of irony in the note, and a shimmer touched her eye. "We could make coffee," she suggested without accusing. Robert wanted to say there wasn't time. The realtor needed signatures. The rep had a notary waiting. The offer was expiring. But the word time came back, the same one his mother had stretched on all those afternoons. He rinsed the cloth strainer, boiled water, measured coffee with a spoon the way he remembered her hand doing it. Helen set out 2 cups. Without saying a word, she took a third from the cabinet and set it upside down. The 3 of them stayed quiet a moment. "If this part reaches you, comment, 'I understand,'" Helen said softly, surprised at herself for dropping a line that sounded like it leapt out of a video. They looked at each other. "Sorry, it's just, I think about how many people go through this while sweeping it under the rug." The smell of coffee filled the house, floated down the hall, and reached the yard. Mrs. Teresa, like a shell, turned to catch the sound coffee makes when it pours. The realtor came back, phone to his ear. "Attorney Valence says without a copy in hand, there's no immediate risk. We signed the purchase agreement, insert a vacate clause, and we resolve." He saw the 3 cups on the table and for some reason stopped talking. Notary, purchase agreement, clauses, all of it felt smaller. Robert set the first cup in front of Helen, the second in the spot where his mother always sat, and held the third in his hand. They sat in silence. And in that silence, he opened his mother's letter from the green folder. "Son, if you're reading this before 6, better yet, because it means you got there early for something you always left for later. If it's after 6, that's okay. The coffee will still be hot. What I have to say fits on a page and in a yard. The page is at the notary and in the manila envelope. The yard is under my feet. I planted them here. I wrote that Mrs. Teresa stays to the end with the garden. If you take care of her, you take care of me. If you don't, I'd rather this house care for a lot of people. Then it'll turn into a reading room, a dance yard, a circle of stories. I already talked to the priest and the association. Mark and Jackie signed with me. Did I do it in secret? I did. Forgive me for that. Some things a mother does in the dark, not to deceive, but to shield from the sun that dazzles. If you want to sell, you can, but first honor it. If you want to stay, stay, but first come back. And when it's 6 p.m., brew coffee for 3. Her handwriting shook at the end like her fingers had danced. Robert folded the letter slowly. Helen wiped her eye with her thumb. The realtor waited for a sentence to fix things, and it didn't come. Instead came a sound, the living room clock striking 2:30. "I'm going to the notary," Robert said at last. "I'll take the docs. I want a certified copy of the will, full content, everything. If the condition's there, it's on the title. And if it is, we talk again." "That'll delay everything," the rep complained. "We got deadlines." The deposit isn't more important than her signature from 4 months ago," Robert said, and the realtor realized the road had curved onto a different street. On the way to the notary, Helen rode shotgun. They were quiet for 2 blocks, until she broke the silence. "Why did you do that to Mom?" He breathed like trying to scrape rust from his lungs. "I thought I was protecting her. The house needed work. The roof sagging, leaks, back taxes. I thought that in a place with a doctor every day, she..." The sentence wilted. "You picked a shortcut," Helen said without anger, and forgot to ask if she wanted to walk that way. The notary's office smelled like all the confessions and lies that pass across a counter. Numbers blinked on a screen. A couple argued about a car title. An old man's hand shook as he tried to remember how to hold a pen. The clerk, in thin frame glasses, listened, typed like diffusing a rumor. "It's on record," he said, printing. "A holographic will with notarized signatures recorded in May. Suspensive condition regarding a third party's life estate, Mrs. Teresa Dorsey, and a destination of the property to a charitable entity if the condition is breached. It's all here." He stamped it. "I can issue a certified copy in full. 10 minutes. Helen closed her eyes for a second. Robert looked at the floor. 10 minutes. So little for how much it changed. When they walked out holding the certified copy, the realtor called before they could dial. "Attorney Valence wants to propose a composition. The developer commits to house Mrs. Teresa for 5 years, builds a ground floor seniors area, and you take a haircut on price but with no risk. Good for everyone." "For everyone who didn't read the letter," Robert said. "Let's talk at 6. 6? The realtor echoed. "Coffee," he said, and hung up. On the way back, they passed the nursing home. Beige facade, geraniums in a planter, the sign with the institution's name. Robert pulled in without planning to. Helen didn't ask. They went in. The nurse recognized them and smiled with that blend of welcome and accountability. "Mrs. Mary's calm today," she said. "She was confused overnight, but she's good now. She's in the TV room watching old soaps on mute, the way she likes." His mother was on a vinyl couch, a blanket over her knees. She looked at them the way you look at a memory that walks up to you. "My boy?" Her voice came without surprise, only with a soft relief. "You got here before coffee." Robert knelt and held her hand. It was small and warm. "Mum, I found your letter. I was afraid you'd find it late," she said, and her smile was younger than her face. "So, are you selling my yard or watering it?" He laughed without liking himself. "I was selling without watering." "Then water it. Yards always wait for the hands that come back." Helen rested her head on their mother's shoulder. They stayed like that for a moment. People instinctively protect, like a fragile vase. The social worker appeared in the doorway, discreet. "Just a reminder, the geriatrician consult is at 5, she said kindly, "and if possible, fewer stimuli late afternoon. Mrs. Mary has a ritual at 6, right? She always asks for coffee. We try to keep that." Robert understood that the word ritual had crossed places. They left the home with the sun tilting its face. At the corner market, they bought coffee, sugar, cheese bread. Back at the house, the realtor and the rep were at the gate, arms crossed in professional worry. "So?" the realtor asked. "What's the path?" "The path of the condition," Robert said. "Today, there's no purchase agreement. At 6, we talk. Anyone who wants sits, listens, and speaks." But the final word starts with her handwriting. "You're throwing money away," the rep said, irritated. "This neighborhood's about to pop. You'll regret it." Helen stepped forward. "We already regret what mattered. Now, we fix it." Mrs. Teresa appeared again, that blue ribbon now in her hair. "If you're going to talk about the yard, call me," she said, like claiming her name at roll call. At 5:50 p.m., the house seemed to gather itself. Robert swept the kitchen. Helen opened the window and dusted the bench. Mrs. Teresa carried in a checkered cloth. The realtor, embarrassed, helped test the electric kettle's outlet. The rep chose the yard, faking an urgent call he didn't know how to explain. The clock became a pointing finger and ticked toward the 6. Robert set water to boil, hung the cloth strainer, measured the grounds. The hand that trembled at first steadied like a hoe, finding the soil's rhythm. At exactly 6 p.m., and the kitchen smelled like a smell that's almost a voice. He put 3 cups on the table. A 4th stood nearby, empty like an invitation. Helen drew a deep breath. "If you've been through something like this, leave your story below," she murmured, smiling, because the sentence carried a sense of community that didn't violate the moment. "Let's get to it," the realtor said, tugging a tie, no heat required. "The developer can indeed maintain Mrs. Teresa for 5 years in writing. After that," he stopped, feeling the weight of after. "The will doesn't have an after," Robert answered, spooning sugar into the cup for the mother who wasn't there and was. "It's a life estate, and there's a duty attached. If I sell, it's to fulfill. If I don't, title goes to the association." He laid the certified copy on the table, face up. The words with the seal had a weight, even the breeze respected. The rep drew breath, and for the first time, spoke softly. "So the deal only happens if we accept the condition." He looked at Mrs. Teresa. "Do you want to stay?" "I want to stay where friendship planted me," she said without theatrics. "I trim my roses, bake corn cake, and pray for whoever needs it. I'm not a pebble in anyone's shoe, but I'm not dust either." Helen pulled out her phone. "The Peaceful Rest Senior Association has a community center project, Robert. I remember the parish meeting. They wanted a place with a yard, a garden, music circles on Saturdays. Mum's house would fit that." Robert felt a new equation forming, with variables that weren't numbers. He looked at the empty cup. "Mum, what do you want me to do?" The question went out into the air because some answers only the absent presence can give. He opened the letter again and noticed, down in the footer, something he'd missed. A little crooked postscript. "If you're torn, divide. Half for the world, half for you. As long as the garden stays a garden," he swallowed. "Here's my proposal," he said, and the room stopped fidgeting. "The house isn't going to the developer. It goes to the association as a community center, like she wrote, and we keep the little back house to fix up and live in." He glanced at Helen. "The 2 of us taking turns caring for Mum, and Mrs. Teresa with a life estate forever, as the law allows. I'll stay. I'll care. I'll fulfill the condition. If one day Mom leaves this world, we'll talk again about whatever remains. But a mid-rise? No, not here. The realtor was speechless for a second. The rep opened his mouth to object and shut it. There was something in that arrangement, that unarmed spreadsheets. The neighbors, unintentionally summoned, relaxed. A little bird perched on the wire. The kettle, like a small giant, sighed on the counter. That isn't commercially rational, the rep tried, one last gasp. It's civilizationally rational, Helen said, and Robert smiled because his sister had a way of finding words that clicked into place. And it's legally sound. Can I call Attorney Valence? The realtor asked, almost apologizing for having only a hammer for so many screws. You can, Robert said, and call the association too. We can sign a letter of intent today. Tomorrow we draw up a deed of gift with a life estate and a condition precedent. There's a name and a way to do this. You're willing to give up money? The rep asked as if the question were a passport. I've given up worse, Robert said, checking the clock and thinking about all the times he'd blown past 6. Now I want the right thing. Helen touched his arm. If you want more stories like this, support with a like now, she said, teasing her own wish that people would listen to what matters, and the three of them laughed, tension finding a corner to sit in. Night dropped like a curtain that knows its cue. The realtor left, promising to loop in the lawyer. The rep walked out without looking much, leaving a business card tipped on the table. Mrs. Teresa washed the cups without being asked. Robert and Helen sat in the yard, listening to the leaves talk. Can you really stay? Helen asked. Work, traffic, all the demands. I'll stay, Robert said. The back house can be fixed up for cheap. I'll sleep here. Tomorrow morning I'll take Mom to feel the sun on the concrete bench. He paused. And at 6 I'll brew coffee. The next day they brought their mother home for a few hours with the geriatricians okay. She walked slowly down the hall, pressed her hand to the wall like recognizing a beloved person's skin, and sat on the concrete bench. Teresa brought out a small plate of cake. The association arrived with 2 people in white t-shirts and the smiles of folks who've wrestled gates and paperwork. The priest came along, folder of projects in hand, jam sessions, gardens, computer classes for seniors, a volunteer therapist. At the notary public, who had seen it all, smiled on the inside as he drafted the deed, gift with condition precedent, life estate, and resolutory clause. The words settled each in their place. Helen took the lead on the back house remodel. Robert felt like his phone got lighter in his pocket, as if gravity had changed its address. And when Mrs. Teresa signed the paper recognizing her life estate, she said, I never thought my name would turn into law. The micro-revelations found their shelves, the certified full copy of the will, the letter with its postscript, the old key, the association's letterhead, the garden layout, the photo of his mother smiling on the bench. Proofs, not of a fight, but of a repair. The developer tried for a while, offered sweeteners, sent a holiday basket with panettone. The rep drove by twice slowly, like someone grieving a project. Then he disappeared. The realtor, who deep down also had a mother, stopped by with a pot of basil. For the garden, he said, opening his arms awkwardly. And sorry about everything. On the first Saturday, the community center was open. The yard turned into a room. 8 seniors clapped at the end of a music circle. A kid from the block read aloud to a lady who had learned to listen before she learned to read. The smell of 6 p.m. Coffee drifted out the window and made people stop on the sidewalk. Robert straightened a chair for his mother who, on her good days, remembered names, and on her bad days, remembered songs. Helen brought cheese bread. Mrs. Teresa planted 2 more rose bushes. Late afternoon, Robert rinsed the strainer and hung it on the nail. He looked around. The ritual had come back, but it wasn't the same. Brewing coffee at 6 no longer served to summon silence. Now, it called people, memory, continuity. The object symbol had changed its function without changing its shape. He understood that some things aren't meant to be sold, they're meant to be fulfilled. When his mother declined a few weeks later, the house became a corridor of quiet voices and respectful hands. The association helped with caregivers. Volunteers traded shifts with soups and prayers. Helen organized medications, and Robert learned to check a fever with the back of his hand. On a windy night, she called him with her eyes. "You got here early," she said, her voice like a leaf letting go. "And the coffee turned out good." "It turned out just like yours, Mom," he said, knowing it didn't. And for that very reason, it did. She slipped away like a boat losing sight of the dock, slowly. On the day of the wake, the house was full. In the yard, people she had cared for now caring for each other. The priest said little. Mrs. Teresa, blue ribbon in her hair, squeezed Robert's hand until it hurt. Helen said she saw. That night, when everything went quiet, Robert went to the concrete bench. The trees spoke a language he didn't know but did understand. He set 3 cups on the kitchen table, even with no one there. He made coffee. At 6, out of stubborn homesickness. He drank slowly and let the second cup grow lukewarm, like time had to relearn how to wait. On Monday, they went to the registry to record the final change. The house officially became the association's, with the encumbrance of the garden and activities. The back house, now remodeled, remained on the title with Robert and Helen holding a life estate, while their duty of care, which had become care for others, endured. The neighbors, once wary, started bringing leftover cake, seed packets, books. The street that woke up grey with construction now had a fixed point of music and 6 p.m. coffee. One afternoon, the developer's rep came back, this time with a boy of about 8, his son maybe. He stood at the curb peeking at the reading circle. Robert saw him from a distance. He walked over without resentment. Came to see how it turned out, the man said. My dad is in a facility now. I brought him here once before. He liked the concrete bench. Have a seat, Robert said, pulling out another chair. Coffee at 6. The man smiled, sad. I don't drink coffee at night. Keeps me up. Sometimes it's good to lose sleep over the right thing, Robert said, and they both laughed with a new kind of respect. When the hour came, Robert stood with a body that knew the path. He rinsed the strainer, added grounds, steadied his hand over the kettle. He looked at the second cup and the third. He came back with the tray. The circle went quiet for a heartbeat, the way it always does. He breathed, and before serving, he spoke, to the air and to whoever wanted to hear. Thanks for staying to the end. If this part touched something inside you, comment, I understand. Sometimes we need to see there are others in the same harbor. The next week, Helen hung a frame on the kitchen wall, their mother's photo on the bench, the letter, the old key, a snippet of Mrs. Teresa's blue ribbon, all mounted together. Proofs, she wrote on a little scrap and stuck it beside it, laughing at her own affectionate excess. The house had become a place for proofs of simple love, and time was the court. Months walked by at a pace that felt right. Robert discovered he could work mornings and be back mid-afternoon, and the back house had a window that let the sky pretend it could fit their hole. He learned to listen to other people's stories, the same stories with new details, and learned to tell his own without apologizing. One day, by the gate, he saw a boy kick a ball and the ball roll in. Instead of scolding, he kicked it back, deliberately missing so the game would go on. One afternoon, Mrs. Teresa took his arm. You look more like your mother when you pour coffee, she said. He didn't know how to answer. And more like your father when you speak softly. Some endings aren't fireworks. They're light switches that stop flickering. The house quit blinking. The will, which had felt like a fist, became an open hand. The condition, which had felt like a noose, turned into a bow. The money, which had seemed like a solution, went back to being paper. One day, the association organized a pruning day. The developer's rep showed up again, this time with pruning shears. He said nothing. He trimmed a branch. Later, he brought his son to the reading circle. The realtor came with out-of-season panettone and blushed when they thanked him. The street, which had looked like an exit route, became an address. At 6 that evening, Robert set out 3 cups, now 4, because there were more invisible presences, and remembered the first time he'd pushed the gate with that black folder under his arm. The gate still creaked, but not like a bad tooth anymore, more like an old house adjusting its bones. He smiled to himself, and before he filled the cups, he rested his hand on the concrete bench like stamping a document. When he served, he spoke low, just for himself to hear. I stayed, Mom. The streetlights came on. The tree cast lace shadows on the wall, and the coffee, like a witness, climbed into the air in the shape of a smell.